When my brother invited me over to see his new house, I wasn't sure what to expect until he greeted me with a smug grin and said, "Thanks for the down payment, sis." He didn't know I'd been keeping a secret, though. And when a knock came at his door, his perfect little world started to crumble in a way he never saw coming. Losing our parents was a heartache I wasn't sure I'd ever fully recover from. They had always been the center of our family, the kind of people who worked hard not just for themselves but to make sure my brother, Adam, and I would have a solid foundation in life. After their passing, Adam and I found ourselves navigating not only the weight of our grief, but also the practical matters of their estate. Our parents hadn't been wealthy, but they had been diligent planners. They left behind a modest inheritance, clearly outlined in their will, with instructions that it be split equally between Adam and me. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to provide each of us with some stability, something our parents had always emphasized. When Adam volunteered to handle the paperwork and manage the estate, I didn't hesitate to let him take the reins. "I'll make sure everything is taken care of," he said confidently, his tone almost reassuring. "You don't have to worry about a thing." At first, I was grateful. Handling legalities and finances while grieving felt overwhelming, and Adam seemed more than willing to step up. I trusted him completely. After all, he was my brother. We'd grown up together, shared countless memories, and supported each other through life's ups and downs. There was no reason for me to doubt his intentions. But as weeks turned into months, I started to notice something unsettling. Adam's updates became increasingly vague. Whenever I asked about the inheritance, he'd brush me off with excuses, delays with the lawyer, issues with the will, or problems with the bank. "It's all tied up in legal red tape," he'd say with a dismissive wave. "You know how these things go. Just give it some time." I believed him at first. Why wouldn't I? But as more time passed, his lack of transparency started to gnaw at me. I wasn't asking for much, just a simple update or some clarity on where things stood. Yet every time I brought it up, Adam would sidestep the conversation or change the subject entirely. The turning point came one afternoon when I decided to call the lawyer directly. I didn't want to go behind Adam's back, but my gut was telling me something wasn't right. "Hi, this is my name," I said when the lawyer answered. "I'm calling about my parents' estate. My brother, Adam, has been handling everything, but I just wanted to check in and see where things stand." The lawyer's response sent a chill down my spine. "I'm sorry, but I haven't been involved with the estate for months. Adam finalized everything a while ago." I felt the air leave my lungs. "Finalized?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," the lawyer confirmed. "As far as I know, everything was settled and distributed." "Is there an issue?" My mind raced as I tried to process what I was hearing. Adam had told me there were delays, yet the lawyer was saying the estate had been settled. Where was my share of the inheritance? And why hadn't Adam said anything? That evening, I confronted Adam. I was nervous but determined to get answers. When I arrived at his house, he greeted me with his usual easygoing demeanor, as if nothing was wrong.
"Hey, sis."
"What's up?" he said, ushering me inside. I didn't waste any time. "Adam, I called the lawyer today," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "He said the estate was finalized months ago." "Care to explain?" For a split second, I saw something flicker across Adam's face, guilt, maybe, or panic. But he quickly recovered, plastering on a casual smile. "Oh, that," he said, waving it off. "Yeah, everything's been sorted out. I meant to tell you, but you know how busy things have been." "Busy?" I repeated, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "Adam, where's my share of the inheritance? You told me there were delays, but now I find out everything's already been distributed." He hesitated, glancing away before finally muttering, "Look, we'll talk about it later, okay? It's not a big deal." But it was a big deal. And as I left his house that evening, my trust in Adam, my brother, the person I thought I could count on, was hanging by a thread. In that moment, I realized this was only the beginning of a betrayal that would change everything. A few weeks after my conversation with Adam, things between us were tense. He avoided my questions about the inheritance, and I decided to back off for the time being. I didn't want to alienate him, even though I knew something wasn't right. Then one evening, I received an unexpected text from him. "Housewarming party at my place this weekend. You have to come. You're going to love it." The message left me confused. I hadn't even known Adam was in the process of buying a house. He'd never mentioned anything about it before, and as far as I knew, his finances weren't exactly stellar. Still, I agreed to go, thinking maybe this would give me some insight into what was going on. When I arrived at Adam's new house, my jaw nearly hit the floor. It wasn't just a house, it was a mansion. A sprawling, two-story home with massive windows, a perfectly manicured lawn, and a luxury car sitting in the driveway. I parked my car and walked toward the front door, my stomach twisting with unease. This house was miles beyond what Adam's income could reasonably afford. He worked a stable job, sure, but this was on another level entirely. Welcome. Adam greeted me at the door with a wide grin, his tone overly enthusiastic. He ushered me inside, where a small group of guests were mingling, sipping drinks, and marveling at the lavish decor. The interior was just as extravagant as the exterior. Vaulted ceilings, marble countertops, and designer furniture. It felt surreal, almost like I'd stepped into someone else's life. Adam was in his element, showing off every inch of the house with a smugness that was impossible to ignore. He led me through the living room, the open-concept kitchen, and even the backyard, which boasted a large pool and a custom-built patio. "This is incredible," I said, struggling to keep my tone neutral. "When did you get all of this?" "Oh, just recently," he replied casually, waving a hand. "It's been in the works for a while. Took a lot of planning, but it all came together perfectly." Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. I wanted to ask more questions, but before I could, he led me back into the kitchen, where he poured himself a glass of wine. As he leaned against the counter, he looked at me with a glint in his eye that I didn't like. "I've been meaning to thank you, by the way," he said, his voice dripping with smugness. "Thank me?" I asked, confused. "For the down payment," he said with a grin. "This place wouldn't have been possible without you." The words hit me like a freight train. I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaky. He shrugged, taking a sip of his wine. "I used the inheritance," he said matter-of-factly. "You weren't doing anything with it, so I figured I'd put it to good use. Look around. Isn't it amazing?" My blood ran cold. He said it so casually, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. As if he hadn't taken something that didn't belong to him and used it for his own gain. "Adam," I said, my voice low and steady, "that money wasn't just yours. It was supposed to be split between us." "Relax, sis," he said, waving me off. "You'll benefit from it too. I mean, you'll always have a place to stay if you need one." I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing my temper wouldn't solve anything, and I didn't want to give Adam the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. Instead, I plastered on a tight smile and said, "It's a beautiful house, Adam. Congratulations." He grinned, clearly pleased with himself, and went back to mingling with his guests. As I left the party that evening, my emotions were a whirlwind. Anger, betrayal, and disbelief churned inside me. But one thing became crystal clear. Adam had crossed a line, and I couldn't let him get away with it. I didn't say anything to him that night, but I made a silent vow to myself as I drove home. If Adam thought he could take what was rightfully mine without consequences, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The truth was out, and now it was time to act. For a moment, I genuinely thought Adam was joking. Surely no one would say something so brazen and expect to be taken seriously. But the smug smirk on his face told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't joking. "What do you mean?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain calm even though my heart was pounding in my chest. "Oh, come on," Adam said, waving his hand dismissively as if he hadn't just admitted to something outrageous. "You weren't going to use the money anyway, and I had a better plan for it. Consider it an investment in family." His words felt like a punch to the gut. I stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said. An investment in family? My share of the inheritance, money that was supposed to provide me with stability, was now the down payment on his dream house, and he thought he could justify it as a favor to me? "Adam," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "that money wasn't yours to use. It was supposed to be split between us. Do you even realize what you've done?" He shrugged, completely unfazed. "Relax, sis. It's not like you were doing anything with it. Besides, this house benefits both of us. You'll always have a place to stay if you need one." His nonchalance was infuriating. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make him understand just how deeply he'd betrayed me. But I knew losing my temper wouldn't get me anywhere. Adam thrived on pushing people's buttons, and I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. Instead, I forced myself to stay composed. "I see," I said, my voice clipped. Well, congratulations on the house. It really is something. Thanks, he said brightly, completely missing the sarcasm in my tone. As I left his house that evening, my mind was racing. The pieces were finally falling into place. The endless delays, the vague excuses, the evasiveness whenever I brought up the inheritance. Adam had orchestrated this from the very beginning. He'd taken advantage of my trust, lied to me, and stolen what was rightfully mine. But what made it worse was the way he'd flaunted it, inviting me to his housewarming party, like he wanted me to admire his handiwork. His arrogance was staggering, and it only fueled my resolve to make things right. Over the next few days, I threw myself into piecing together the full scope of what Adam had done. I started by gathering every document I could find related to our parents' estate, the will, the lawyer's correspondence, and the bank statements. I pored over them for hours, looking for discrepancies or anything that might give me leverage. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. The bank records showed a significant transfer from the estate account to Adam's personal account shortly after the inheritance was finalized. That transfer was followed by a large payment to a real estate company, the down payment on his house. I felt a mix of vindication and fury as I stared at the evidence. Adam hadn't just been careless or mistaken. He'd deliberately taken my share of the inheritance and used it for his own gain. Next, I reached out to the lawyer who had handled our parents' estate. "Hi, this is my name," I said when he picked up. "I'm calling about my parents' estate. I have some questions about how the funds were distributed." The lawyer seemed surprised to hear from me. "I thought Adam was handling everything on your behalf," he said. "He told me you'd agreed to let him manage the funds." My stomach turned. "I never agreed to that," I said firmly. "In fact, Adam told me there were delays with the inheritance. I've just discovered that the estate was finalized months ago, and I haven't received a single cent." There was a pause on the other end of the line before the lawyer responded. "I think we need to set up a meeting to go over this in detail," he said. "If we're saying is true, there may have been a serious breach of trust." Hanging up the phone, I felt a renewed sense of determination. Adam might have thought he'd gotten away with it, but he was about to learn otherwise. I wasn't just going to confront him. I was going to hold him accountable. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about standing up for myself and making sure Adam understood the consequences of his actions. The pieces were finally coming together, and with every new discovery, my resolve grew stronger. Adam had underestimated me, but he was about to find out just how wrong he was. I forced a tight smile as Adam beamed at me, clearly proud of the house he'd stolen my inheritance to buy. "It's a lovely house," I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Inside, I wanted to scream, to call him out right then and there, but I held back. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose my composure. Adam didn't notice the tension in my voice or the way my eyes lingered a little too long on the marble countertops and designer furniture. He was too busy basking in his own self-satisfaction, showing off his achievement. To him, this wasn't betrayal. It was just a clever way to get what he wanted. As I left his house that evening, the anger and betrayal weighed heavily on me, but so did something else: resolve. I couldn't let him get away with this, but I also knew I needed to play this smart. Adam had underestimated me, and I intended to use that to my advantage. On the drive home, my mind raced with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to confront Adam immediately, to lay everything out and force him to admit what he'd done. But another part of me, the more rational side, knew that wouldn't accomplish anything. Adam was the kind of person who thrived on manipulation and deflection. If I didn't have solid proof, he'd twist the situation to make it look like I was the one in the wrong. So instead of confronting him, I made a plan. I would gather every piece of evidence I could find related to our parents' estate: emails, bank statements, legal documents, and the original will. I needed to understand exactly how he'd pulled this off and leave no room for him to deny it. I started by digging through my own files. I'd kept copies of most of the correspondence with the estate lawyer, though I hadn't looked at them in months. As I read through the emails and reviewed the documents, I began to piece together a timeline. It became clear that Adam had taken control of the estate almost immediately after our parents passed, using his position as the executor to redirect the funds into his own account. The deeper I dug, the angrier I became. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a calculated betrayal. Adam had taken advantage of my grief and my trust, knowing I wouldn't question him until it was too late. Next, I contacted the estate lawyer directly. He remembered me from our brief interactions early on and seemed surprised to hear from me again. "I thought Adam was handling everything on your behalf," he said when I explained the situation. "That's what he told you," I replied, my voice tinged with frustration. But he's been lying to me. The estate was supposed to be split equally, yet I haven't received a single cent. The lawyer hesitated before responding. That's highly irregular, he said. If you'd like, I can send you a detailed breakdown of the transactions related to the estate. That should give us a clearer picture of what happened. I agreed, and within a few days, I had the documents in hand. As I reviewed the bank statements and transaction records, the full scope of Adam's betrayal came into focus. He'd funneled the entire inheritance into his personal account and used it as the down payment for his house. The timing of the transactions aligned perfectly with the delays and excuses he'd fed me for months. With the evidence in front of me, I felt a mix of vindication and fury. Adam's actions were even more blatant than I'd imagined, and now I had the proof to back it up. But instead of rushing to confront him, I decided to take my time. I reached out to a trusted lawyer of my own to discuss my options. I wanted to ensure that when I confronted Adam, I would be in the strongest position possible, legally and emotionally. Based on what you've shown me, the lawyer said during our initial consultation, you have a very strong case. Your brother's actions constitute a clear breach of fiduciary duty as the executor of the estate. If he refuses to return your share of the inheritance, we can pursue legal action to recover the funds. Hearing those words gave me a sense of empowerment. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I had control over the situation. Adam might have thought he'd gotten away with his scheme, but he was about to learn just how wrong he was. In the weeks that followed, I continued to prepare quietly. I didn't tell Adam what I discovered, nor did I give him any indication that I was planning to take action. Instead, I kept up appearances, responding to his occasional texts and calls as if nothing were wrong. But beneath the surface, I was building my case, piece by piece. I wanted to ensure that when the time came, Adam wouldn't have a single excuse to hide behind. He thought he'd outsmarted me, but what he didn't realize was that I wasn't just angry, I was determined. Adam had crossed a line, and I was ready to make him face the consequences of his betrayal. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity as I dove headfirst into unraveling the full extent of Adam's betrayal. It wasn't just about finding proof anymore. It was about understanding how he'd managed to deceive me so completely. My first call was to the estate lawyer who had handled our parents' affairs. When I introduced myself, he sounded polite but puzzled. I thought your brother was handling everything, he said. The words were like a punch to the gut. I'd heard variations of that excuse so many times before, but hearing it from the lawyer himself made it real in a way I hadn't expected. Yes, I replied, keeping my tone steady. He told me there were delays, but now I'm not so sure. Can you tell me what's going on? The lawyer hesitated before responding, clearly trying to tread carefully. Well, as far as I know, everything was finalized months ago. The inheritance was distributed, and the estate has been closed for quite some time. Hearing that confirmed what I'd already begun to suspect. I haven't seen a single cent, I said firmly. And Adam's been giving me excuse after excuse. Something doesn't add up. Let me check my records, the lawyer offered. If you'd like, I can provide you with a detailed breakdown of the transactions and disbursements related to the estate. I thanked him and agreed, though my hands were trembling as I hung up the phone. I already knew the inheritance was gone. I'd seen the house, after all, but I needed to know exactly how Adam had pulled it off. When the lawyer's email arrived a few days later, I opened it with a mix of dread and determination. The documents were thorough, outlining every transaction related to the estate. As I sifted through the records, the truth became glaringly clear. Adam had transferred the entire inheritance into his personal account under the pretense of managing the funds. From there, it was easy to see where the money had gone. A substantial payment to a real estate company had been made shortly after the transfer, undoubtedly the down payment for his house. He hadn't even tried to cover his tracks. The timing of the transactions matched perfectly with his claims of delays and legal issues. My stomach churned as I stared at the evidence. It was one thing to suspect Adam had taken the money, but seeing it laid out so plainly was another matter entirely. He hadn't just taken what wasn't his. He'd done it with full confidence that I wouldn't catch on. But catching on wasn't enough. I needed to be strategic. If Adam was willing to lie to me about this, who knew what else he was capable of? I couldn't afford to confront him without a solid plan in place. I reached out to a lawyer of my own, someone I trusted to guide me through the next steps. During our first meeting, I laid everything out, the original will, the bank statements, and the transaction records. My lawyer listened carefully, her expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence I presented. "This is a clear breach of fiduciary duty," she said finally. As the executor of the estate, your brother had a legal obligation to distribute the funds according to the will. Instead, he misappropriated the inheritance for his own gain. You have a strong case if you decide to take legal action. Hearing those words was both validating and sobering. Adam's actions weren't just a betrayal, they were illegal. And while I wanted to believe he'd see reason if confronted with the evidence, I couldn't count on that. Over the next few weeks, I worked closely with my lawyer to build an airtight case. We documented everything, from the initial will to the suspicious bank transfers. Every time I uncovered a new piece of evidence, I felt a mix of anger and resolve. Adam had underestimated me, and now he was about to face the consequences of his actions. Still, I couldn't ignore the emotional toll it was taking on me. Adam wasn't just my brother. He was someone I'd trusted implicitly, someone I'd grown up with and looked to for support. The realization that he'd been capable of such deceit cut deeper than I wanted to admit. But every time I wavered, I reminded myself of the bigger picture. This wasn't just about the money, it was about standing up for myself and holding Adam accountable. He'd counted on my silence and my willingness to overlook his actions, but those days were over. With every phone call, email, and piece of evidence we collected, my resolve grew stronger. The paper trail didn't just expose what Adam had done. It showed me just how far he'd gone to put his own interests above everything else. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Confronting Adam would be messy, emotional, and painful. But I also knew I couldn't let him get away with it. The paper trail was complete, and now it was time to decide how to use it. Once the paper trail was complete, I knew it was time to take action. Confronting Adam directly might have been satisfying in the short term, but I wanted more than a heated argument. I wanted accountability. He had used my trust and grief to his advantage, and if he thought he could walk away unscathed, he was about to be proven wrong. The first step was enlisting the help of a trusted lawyer. I met with her again, presenting all the evidence I had meticulously gathered, the estate records, the bank statements, and even correspondence with the original estate lawyer. She reviewed everything with a sharp eye, nodding as she pieced together the timeline. "This is as clear-cut as it gets," she said finally, tapping her pen against the will. "Your brother didn't just mishandle the inheritance. He outright stole your portion and used it for personal gain. Legally, he doesn't have a leg to stand on." Her confidence bolstered my own. "What's the next step?" I asked, leaning forward. "We file a formal complaint," she said. "He'll be served with a notice demanding that he return your share of the inheritance. If he refuses, we can escalate to a lawsuit." Over the next few days, we prepared the necessary paperwork. The complaint was detailed and direct, outlining Adam's actions and demanding full repayment of my portion of the inheritance. As I reviewed the document, I felt a sense of validation. Every lie he'd told, every excuse he'd made, it was all laid bare in black and white. Filing the complaint wasn't just about the money. It was about standing up for myself and refusing to let Adam's betrayal go unanswered. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. Once he's served, he'll have a limited window to respond, my lawyer explained. If he tries to fight it, we'll take it to court. But given the evidence, I doubt he'll want to escalate. Still, I couldn't help but wonder how Adam would react. Would he try to downplay what he'd done? Would he finally admit his wrongdoing? Or would he dig in his heels and refuse to take responsibility? As we finalized the paperwork, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. This entire ordeal had been emotionally exhausting, but it had also taught me a lot about resilience and self-respect. For so long, I had been afraid of rocking the boat, of jeopardizing my relationship with Adam by standing up for myself. But now I saw that letting him get away with this would have been far worse. The day we filed the complaint, I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. I knew it wouldn't be long before Adam was served, and the thought of him opening that envelope made me equal parts anxious and satisfied. Later that evening, I sat down with a cup of tea, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I kept picturing Adam's reaction, the moment he realized his scheme was unraveling. Would he panic? Would he try to talk his way out of it? Despite my nerves, I felt a growing sense of resolve. This wasn't just about me, it was about sending a message that actions have consequences. Adam might have thought he could manipulate me, but he was about to learn otherwise. In the days leading up to the service, I kept up appearances, responding to Adam's occasional texts with polite indifference. I didn't want to tip him off that anything was coming. Every time he messaged me, bragging about his house or making offhand comments about family investments, it only strengthened my resolve. Finally, the day arrived. I received a call from my lawyer confirming that Adam had been served. The notice had been delivered to his house, leaving no room for ambiguity about what was coming next. As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but imagine the look on his face when he opened the envelope. His smug confidence would be replaced by shock, maybe even fear, as he realized his little scheme wasn't as foolproof as he'd thought. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. Adam's betrayal had hurt deeply, but knowing that I was taking steps to hold him accountable made it easier to breathe. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The process was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control. Adam's perfect little world was about to face a reckoning, and this time, he wouldn't be able to talk his way out of it. The setup was complete, and now it was only a matter of time before the consequences came knocking at his door. The day Adam received his reckoning started out like any other for him. From what I'd heard, he was thoroughly enjoying his new house and living the life of someone who thought he'd won. His social media posts were filled with pictures of backyard barbecues, perfectly plated meals in his gourmet kitchen, and sunsets viewed from his massive patio. I couldn't help but wonder if he ever thought about me, if he felt even a flicker of guilt for what he'd done. But judging by his smug demeanor at the housewarming party, I doubted it. Adam had convinced himself he was untouchable. That illusion was about to shatter. That afternoon, as Adam lounged in his sunlit living room, there was a knock at the door. He wasn't expecting anyone, but he answered it anyway, expecting perhaps a neighbor or a delivery. Instead, he found himself face-to-face with a process server holding an envelope addressed to him. Adam, last name? The process server asked, confirming his identity. Yeah, that's me, Adam replied, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. The server handed him the envelope and said, "You've been served." Adam hesitated, staring at the envelope as the server walked away. He closed the door and stood there for a moment, the unease creeping in. Slowly, he tore open the envelope and pulled out the documents inside. As he read the first page, his confusion morphed into shock, then dread. The legal notice was clear and direct. Adam was being sued for misappropriation of funds and breach of fiduciary duty. The complaint detailed how he had taken the inheritance meant to be split equally and used it solely for his benefit. It demanded the immediate return of my share of the funds, along with any associated damages. For the first time, Adam was facing the full weight of his actions. The smirk that had been so prominent at his housewarming party was long gone. Later that evening, my phone rang. I knew who it was before I even looked at the screen. Taking a deep breath, I answered, bracing myself for the inevitable explosion. "What the hell is this?" Adam barked, his voice tinged with panic and anger. "Are you seriously suing me?" I kept my voice calm and measured, refusing to let his outburst rattle me. "Yes, Adam," I said simply. "I am." "You're blowing this way out of proportion," he shouted. "You're going to ruin our family over some money? What's wrong with you?" I felt a flash of anger at his attempt to shift the blame onto me, but I kept my composure. "What's wrong with me?" I repeated, my tone sharp. "Adam, you took what wasn't yours, lied to me about it, and then flaunted it in my face. If anyone's ruining this family, it's you." He sputtered, searching for a response, but I didn't give him the chance. "This isn't about revenge," I continued. "This is about accountability. You've had every opportunity to come clean and make this right, but you chose not to. Now you're going to face the consequences of that choice." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Adam finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost pleading. "Look, sis, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought you'd understand. I thought you'd be happy for me." "Happy for you?" I repeated, incredulous. "You stole from me, Adam. You took what our parents left for both of us and used it to buy your dream house. How am I supposed to be happy about that?" "I can fix this," he said quickly, his tone desperate. "Let me fix this. We don't have to go through lawyers or courts. Just give me some time and I'll figure something out." I sighed, my resolve unwavering. "Adam, I gave you time. I gave you the benefit of the doubt. And you used that time to lie to me. I'm done waiting for you to do the right thing. You've left me no choice." He muttered something under his breath, but I didn't catch it. "This is your chance to make things right, Adam," I said firmly. "I suggest you take it." When I hung up, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was relieved to finally confront him, to tell him exactly how I felt. But another part of me was deeply saddened by how far things had deteriorated between us. Adam wasn't just my brother. He was someone I had once trusted implicitly. But I knew this wasn't the end. Adam might have been caught off guard by the lawsuit, but I doubted he would take it lying down. He had a knack for turning situations to his advantage, and I had no doubt he'd try to find a way to squirm out of this one. Still, for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt like I had the upper hand. Adam's perfect little world was crumbling, and he had no one to blame but himself. The knock at his door had set everything in motion, and now it was only a matter of time before justice was served. The weeks leading up to the court date were a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. My lawyer and I went over every detail of the case, ensuring that the evidence was airtight. Meanwhile, Adam tried every tactic he could think of to avoid facing the reality of what he'd done. From pleading messages to outright accusations of me overreacting, he threw everything at the wall to see what would stick. I ignored his attempts to sway me, knowing full well that his remorse was rooted in fear, not genuine regret. The day we walked into the courtroom, I was nervous but resolute. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore, it was about standing up for myself and showing Adam that his actions had consequences. Adam arrived dressed in a suit, though his usual confidence seemed noticeably shaken. His lawyer stood beside him, leafing through a stack of papers that I could only assume were an attempt to defend the indefensible. The judge wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. My lawyer presented the evidence with clarity and precision, laying out a timeline that left little room for interpretation. The will explicitly stated that the inheritance was to be split equally, and the bank records proved that Adam had funneled the entire sum into his personal account before using it as a down payment on his house. Adam's lawyer tried to argue that his actions were made with good intentions. My client believed he was acting in the best interests of the family, she said. The purchase of the house was meant to provide a shared asset that could benefit both parties. The judge raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Is there any documentation to suggest that this was agreed upon by both parties? Adam's lawyer stammered, flipping through her papers. Well, no, Your Honor, but nothing. The judge interrupted, her tone firm. The terms of the will are clear. The inheritance was to be split equally, and the defendant had no right to make unilateral decisions about its use. When it was Adam's turn to speak, he tried to appeal to emotion. Your Honor, he began, his voice shaky. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I thought I was doing something good for my family. My sister and we've always been close. I never imagined it would come to this. I sat there, biting my tongue as he attempted to paint himself as the victim. My lawyer glanced at me and gave a reassuring nod, as if to say, let him dig his own grave. The judge, however, wasn't swayed. Mr. Last name, this isn't about intentions, it's about actions. You knowingly took your sister's rightful share of the inheritance without her consent. That is a breach of fiduciary duty, and it is unacceptable. With that, the ruling was swift and decisive. Adam was ordered to repay every cent he had taken from the inheritance, along with additional damages to cover legal fees and emotional distress. The judgment was as much a condemnation of his actions as it was a validation of my decision to stand up for myself. As the gavel came down, a wave of relief washed over me. The weight I'd been carrying for months finally lifted, replaced by a sense of closure I hadn't thought possible. Adam sat frozen in his seat, his usual smugness replaced by a look of disbelief and humiliation. Outside the courtroom, I took a deep breath, savoring the crisp air and the knowledge that justice had been served. Adam tried to approach me as I was leaving, his expression a mix of anger and desperation. Are you happy now? He spat, his voice low but venomous. I met his gaze, my own unwavering. No, Adam, I'm not happy, but I am at peace. And that's worth more than anything you could ever take from me. He had no response to that, turning on his heel and walking away without another word. In the days that followed, I reflected on everything that had led to this moment. Adam's betrayal had been painful, but it had also taught me an invaluable lesson about resilience and self-respect. I'd faced one of the most difficult challenges of my life, and I'd come out the other side stronger for it. As for Adam, his actions had cost him more than just money. They had cost him my trust. Whether our relationship could ever be repaired was uncertain, but for now, I was content to focus on my own healing. Leaving the courtroom that day, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in months. Adam's smugness was gone, replaced by the harsh reality that actions have consequences. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally move forward. The weeks after the court's decision were quiet, almost unnervingly so. Adam, who once seemed to take pleasure in flaunting his success and inserting himself into every aspect of my life, had gone silent. No calls, no texts, no smug social media posts about his family investment. It was as if he'd disappeared overnight. I knew he was still around, of course. The court had given him a strict timeline to return my share of the inheritance, and to his credit, he followed through. The funds were wired back into my account within days, though I suspected it came at great personal cost. I couldn't imagine it was easy for him to part with that money after building his dream house on the foundation of his lies. When I saw the notification confirming the deposit, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Instead, there was a strange hollowness. The money was rightfully mine, but the price of getting it back had been steep, not financially, but emotionally. Adam and I had grown up together, shared countless memories, and leaned on each other through life's challenges. Now, it felt like that bond was irrevocably broken. As the dust settled, I began to reflect on everything that had happened. This ordeal had been one of the most difficult experiences of my life, but it had also been a catalyst for growth. I'd spent so much of my life avoiding conflict, always trying to keep the peace, even at my own expense. But this time, I hadn't backed down. Standing up for myself had been terrifying, especially against someone I loved and trusted. There were moments when I doubted whether it was worth it, whether I was making the situation worse by refusing to let things slide. But as I looked at the evidence of Adam's betrayal and the lengths I'd gone to set things right, I knew I'd made the right choice. I hoped that this experience would teach Adam something as well. Honesty and respect weren't just nice ideas. They were the foundation of any relationship, whether familial, professional, or personal. By prioritizing his own desires over fairness and trust, Adam had fractured something that might never fully heal. Still, I wasn't naive enough to believe that one court ruling would change Adam overnight. He'd always been someone who could rationalize his actions, spinning stories to paint himself in the best light. But the fact that he'd returned the inheritance, even under legal pressure, gave me a sliver of hope that he might be capable of growth. We hadn't spoken since the day in court, but I thought often about what I might say if he reached out. I wasn't ready to forgive him yet, not entirely. Forgiveness, I'd learned, wasn't about absolving someone of their actions, but about freeing yourself from the weight of their betrayal. And I wasn't there yet. Most importantly, I'd learned that trust, once broken, was nearly impossible to rebuild. Adam's actions had left a scar that wouldn't fade quickly, if at all. But I also learned something about myself. I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. One evening, as I sat in my living room sipping tea, I thought about what I wanted to do with the inheritance now that it was back in my hands. For months, the money had felt like a source of conflict, a symbol of Adam's betrayal. But now, it felt like an opportunity to honor my parents' legacy in a way that truly mattered. I decided to invest part of it in something meaningful, something they would have been proud of. I made donations to causes they cared about, set up a small college fund for a family friend's child, and put the rest towards securing my own future. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. As for Adam, I didn't know what the future held for our relationship. The silence between us was deafening, but maybe it was what we both needed to process what had happened. I hoped that one day, we could have an honest conversation about everything, not to rekindle what we'd lost, but to find some sense of closure. Looking back, this ordeal had been a painful reminder of the fragility of trust. But it had also been a testament to the importance of standing up for yourself, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, and even when it means confronting someone you love. I wasn't the same person I'd been when this began. I was stronger, more self-assured, and more willing to fight for what I deserved. And that, more than anything, was the silver lining in an otherwise difficult chapter of my life. Trust, once broken, may never fully return. But self-respect? That's something I'll carry with me forever. As I look back on everything that happened, a strange mix of emotions fills me. There's pride in how I handled myself, relief that the ordeal is behind me, and a bittersweet ache for the relationship with Adam that I once cherished. It wasn't an easy journey, but it taught me lessons I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. The experience tested me in ways I never expected. It forced me to confront not just Adam's betrayal, but also my own tendency to avoid conflict, to let things slide for the sake of peace. This time, I chose a different path. I stood up for myself, even when it was uncomfortable and messy, and I emerged stronger for it. That strength wasn't just about recovering my share of the inheritance. It was about reclaiming my sense of self-worth. Adam's actions had shaken my faith in others, but they'd also reminded me of the importance of setting boundaries and demanding respect. Those lessons were hard-earned, but they were worth every difficult moment. With the inheritance now securely back in my hands, I've taken steps to build a future that would make my parents proud. Part of the money went toward practical needs, paying off debts, investing in my retirement, and setting aside a fund for emergencies. But I also used some of it to do things that brought me joy, things I'd put off for far too long. I started traveling, exploring places my parents had always dreamed of visiting. I took up hobbies I'd abandoned over the years, like painting and gardening, finding solace in the creative process. Each decision felt like a small victory, a way of reclaiming the life I wanted to live. The inheritance wasn't just money. It was a gift from my parents, a symbol of their love and their desire for me to have a secure and fulfilling future. Honoring that gift felt like the ultimate way to heal from everything that had happened. As for Adam, our relationship remained strained. After the court ruling, he retreated into his own world, avoiding contact with me for months. Occasionally, I'd hear updates about him through mutual acquaintances. He was struggling to maintain the house, juggling expenses he hadn't anticipated. Part of me felt a pang of sympathy for him, but another part reminded me that he'd brought this on himself. Adam's choices had consequences, and while I hoped he'd learn from them, I knew it wasn't my responsibility to ensure he did. Over time, he reached out a few times, his messages tentative and careful. They were brief, hope you're doing well, or thinking about you, but they felt like the beginnings of a bridge. I wasn't ready to cross that bridge yet, but I left the door open, unsure of what the future might hold for us. Forgiveness, I've learned, is a journey. It doesn't mean forgetting what happened or excusing someone's actions. It means letting go of the anger and resentment that weigh you down. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it, one day at a time. In the end, the best revenge isn't anger or bitterness. It's living well. And that's exactly what I intend to do. I've built a life I'm proud of, one rooted in self-respect and gratitude for the lessons I've learned. I no longer dwell on the betrayal or the pain it caused. Instead, I focus on the things that bring me joy and fulfillment, knowing that I've emerged from this experience stronger than ever. Looking forward, I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with Adam. Maybe we'll find a way to rebuild, or maybe we won't. Either way, I've made peace with the past, and I'm determined to keep moving forward. This chapter of my life is closed, but the story isn't over. There are new adventures to be had, new memories to create, and new lessons to learn. And as I step into the future, I do so with confidence, knowing that I have the strength to face whatever comes my way.